Top of page 40 in the middle of chapter 3. It shouldn't be put straight into the pan. That makes it tough. It should be boiled first in a little water. With our knives, we squat around in a circle and fill our bellies. That is cat. If for 1 hour in a year something eatable were to be had in some one place only within that hour, as if moved by a vision, he would put on his cap, go out, and walk directly there, as though following a compass, and find it. He finds everything. If it's cold, a small stove and wood, hay and straw, a table and chairs, but above all, food. It's uncanny. One would think he conjured it out of thin air. His masterpiece was 4 boxes of lobsters. Admittedly, we would rather have had a good beef steak. We've settled ourselves on the sunny side of the hut. There is a smell of tar, of summer, and of sweaty feet. Cat sits beside me. He likes to talk. Today, we have done an hour saluting drill because Jaden failed to salute a major smartly enough. Cat can't get it out of his head. You take it from me, we're losing the war because we can salute too well, he says. Crop stalks up, with his breeches rolled up and his feet bare. He lays out his washed socks to dry on the grass. Cat turns his eyes to heaven, lets off a mighty fart, and says meditatively, "Every little bean must be heard as well as seen." The two begin to argue. At the same time, they lay a bottle of beer on the result of an air fight that's going on above us. Kaczynski won't budge from the opinion, which, as an old front hog, he rhymes, "Give 'em all the same grub and all the same pay, and the war would be over and done in a day." Kropp, on the other hand, is a thinker. He proposes that a declaration of war should be a kind of popular festival with entrance tickets and bands, like a bullfight. Then, in the arena, the ministers and generals of the two countries, dressed in bathing drawers and armed with clubs, can have it out among themselves. Whoever survives, his country wins. That would be much simpler and more just than this arrangement, where the wrong people do the fighting. The subject is dropped, then the conversation turns to drill. A picture comes before me. Burning midday in the barrack yard, the heat hangs over the square. The barracks are deserted. Everything sleeps. All one hears is the drummers practicing. They have installed themselves somewhere and practice brokenly, dully, monotonously. Top of page 42. What a concord! Midday heat, barrack square, and drummers beating. The windows of the barracks are empty and dark. From some of them, trousers are hanging to dry. The rooms are cool, and one looks toward them longingly. Oh, dark, musty platoon huts with the iron bedsteads, the checkered bedding, the lockers, and the stools. Even you can become the object of desire. Out here, you have a faint resemblance to home. Your rooms full of the smell of stale food, sleep, smoke, and clothes. Kaczynski paints it all in lively colors. What we would not give to be able to return to it. Farther back than our thoughts dare not go. Those early morning hours of instruction. What are the parts of the 98 rifle? The midday hours of physical training. Pianists forward, by the right, quick march, report to the cookhouse for potato peeling. We indulge in reminiscences. Kropp laughs suddenly and says, "Change at Lone." That was our corporal's favorite game. Lone is a railway junction. In order that our fellows going on shouldn't get lost there, Himmeltoss used to practice the change in the barrack room. We had to learn that at Lone, to reach the branch line, we must pass through a subway. The beds represented the subway, and each man stood at attention on the left side of his bed. Then came the command, "Change at Lone," and like lightning, everyone scrambled under the bed to the opposite side. We practiced this for hours on end. Meanwhile, the German airplane has been shot down. Like a comet, it bursts into a streamer of smoke and falls headlong. Kropp has lost the bottle of beer. Disgruntled, he counts out the money from his wallet. Surely Himmeltoss was a very different fellow as a postman, say I, after Albert's disappointment has subsided. Then how does it come that he's such a bully as a drill sergeant? The question revives Kropp more particularly as he hears there's no more beer in the canteen. It's not only Himmeltoss, there are lots of them. As sure as they get a stripe or a star, they become different men, just as they'd swallow concrete. That's the uniform, I suggest. Roughly speaking, it is, says Kat, and prepares for a long speech. But the root of the matter lies somewhere. For instance, if you train a dog to eat potatoes and then afterwards put a piece of meat in front of him, he'll snap at it as it's his nature. And if you give a man a little bit of authority, he behaves just the same way. He snaps at it too. The things are precisely the same. In himself, man is essentially a beast, only he butters it over like a slice of bread with a little decorum. The army is based on that. One man must always have power over the other. The mischief is merely that each one has much too much power. A non-com can torment a private, a lieutenant, a non-com, a captain, a lieutenant, until he goes mad. And because they know they can, they all soon acquire the habit, more or less. Take a simple case. We're marching back from the parade ground dog tired. Then comes the order to sing. We sing spiritlessly, for it is all we can do to trudge along with our rifles. At once, the company is turned about and has to do another hour's drill as punishment. On the march back, to order on the march back, the order to sing is given again. And once more we start. Now, what's the use of all that? It's simply that the company's commander's head has been turned by having so much power, and nobody blames him. On the contrary, he's praised for being strict. That, of course, is only a trifling instance, but it holds also in very different affairs. Now I ask you, let a man be whatever you like in peacetime. What occupation is there which he can behave like that without getting a crack on the nose? He can only do that in the army. It goes to the heads of them all, you see, and the more insignificant a man has been in civil life, the worse it takes him. They say, of course, there must be discipline, ventures Crop meditatively. True, growls Cat, they always do. And it may be so, still it oughtn't become an abuse. But you try to explain that to a blacksmith or a laborer or workman. You try to make that clear to a peasant. And that's what most of them are. All he sees is that he has been put through the mill and sent to the front, but he knows well enough he must do and what not do and what not. It's simply amazing, I tell you, that the ordinary Tommy sticks it all up here in the front line. Simply amazing. No one protests. Everyone knows that drill ceases only in the front line and begins again a few miles ahead, with all the absurdities of saluting and parade. It's an iron law that the soldier must be employed under every circumstance. Here Jaden comes up with a flushed face. He's so excited that he stutters, beaming with satisfaction. He stammers off, Himmeltoss is on his way. He's coming to the front. Jaden has a special grudge against Himmeltoss because of the way he educated him in the barracks. Jaden wets his bed. He does it at night in his sleep. Himmeltoss maintained that it was a sheer laziness and invented a method worthy of himself for curing Jaden. He hunted up another piss-a-bed and named Kinderweiter from a neighboring unit and quartered him with Jaden. In the huts, they were the usual bunks, one above the other in pairs with mattresses and on wire nettings. Himmeltoss put these two so that one occupied upper and the other lower bunk. The man underneath, of course, had a vile time. The next night they were changed over and the lower one put on top so that he could retaliate. That was Himmeltoss's system of self-education. The idea was low but not ill-conceived. Unfortunately, it accomplished nothing because the first assumption was wrong. It was not laziness in either of them. Anyone who looked at their sallow skin could see that. The matter ended in one of them always sleeping on the floor where he frequently caught cold. Meanwhile, Hay sits down beside us. He winks at me and rubs his paws thoughtfully. We once spent the finest day of our army life together, the day before we left for the front. He had been allotted to one of the recently formed regiments, but we were first to be sent back for equipment to the garrison. not to the reinforcement depot or, of course, but to another barrack. We were due to leave the next morning early. In the evening, we prepared ourselves to square accounts with Hemiltos. We had sworn for weeks past to do this. Kropp had even gone so far as to propose entering the postal service in peacetime in order to be Himmeltoss's superior when he became a postman again. He reveled in the thought of how he would grind him. It was this that made it impossible for him to crush us altogether. We always reckoned that later, at the end of war, we would have our revenge on him. In the meantime, we decided to give him a good hiding. What could he do to us, anyhow, if he didn't recognize us and we left early in the morning? We knew which pub he used to visit every evening. Returning to the barracks, he had to go along a dark, uninhabited road. There we waited for him behind a pile of stones. I had a bed cover with me. We trembled with suspense, hoping he would be alone. At last we heard his footsteps, which we recognized easily. So often had we heard it in the mornings as the door flew open and he bawled, "Get up!" "Alone?" whispered Kropp. "Alone." Top of page 48. I slipped round the pile of stones with Jaden. Himmeltoss seemed a little elevated. He was singing. His belt buckle gleamed. He came on unsuspectingly. We seized the bed cover, made a quick leap, threw it over his head from behind, and pulled it round him so that he stood there in a white sack, unable to raise his arms. The singing stopped. The next moment, Hay Westus was there, and spreading his arms, he shoved us back in order to be first in. He put himself in position with evident satisfactory, raised his arms like a signal mast, and his hand like a coal shovel, and fetched such a blow on the white sack as he would have felled on an ox. Himmeltoss was thrown down. He rolled 5 yards and started to yell, but we were prepared for that and had brought a cushion. Hay squatted down and laid the cushion on his knees, felt where Himmeltoss's head was, and pressed it down on the pillow. Immediately his voice was muffled. Hay let him get a gasp of air every so often, when he would give a mighty yell that was immediately hushed. Jaden unbuttoned Himmeltoss's braces and pulled down his trousers, holding the whip meantime in his teeth. Then he stood up and set to work. Top of 49. It was a wonderful picture. Himmeltoss on the ground, Hay bending over him with a fiendish grin and his mouth open with bloodlust. Himmeltoss's head on his knees, then the convulsed, stripped drawers, the knock knees executing at every blow most original movements and the lowered breeches, and towering over them like a woodcutter, the indefatigable Jaden. In the end, we had to drag him away to get our turn. Finally, Hay stood Himmeltoss on his feet again and gave one last personal remonstrance. As he stretched out his right arm, preparatory to giving him a box on the ear, he looked as if he were going to reach down a star. Himmeltoss toppled over. Hay stood him up again, made ready, and fetched him a second well-aimed beauty with the left hand. Himmeltoss yelled and made off on all fours. His striped postman's backside gleamed in the moonlight. We disappeared at full speed. Hay looked round once again and said wrathfully, satisfied, and rather mysteriously, "Revenge is black pudding." Himmeltoss ought to have been pleased. His saying that we should each educate one another had borne fruit for himself. We had become successful students of his method. He never discovered whom he had to thank for the business. At any rate, he scored a bed cover out of it. For when we returned a few hours later to look for it, it was no longer to be found. That evening's work made us more or less contented to leave the next morning. And old Buffer was pleased to describe us as young heroes.